the difference between us and other animals is that we do have the capability of discerning that harm is an actual harm and something that we don't want to do, like you mentioned sharks, for instance. I would most certainly agree, but I would still push for the notion and ask perhaps if you can discern that there must be something behind that, such as the examples I gave about agreeing that harm is wrong, but knowing that I can twist it towards my benefit. What is it that's behind that? And I think I'll leave it at that question right now, if you discern that there is anything else. Okay. Urging that.
Well, my short answer to that is no. I don't think there is anything behind it. I think there comes a point where we have to just. I mean, there comes a point where you can only say, "Well, because that's how I feel," and that's the way everyone is ultimately. I mean, why do you value? Why do you think that harming people is bad? Why is it a value to you to prevent harm when you can? Well, I mean, we could turn the question around. We could say, well, if you don't think that it's just inherently bad to harm someone, but you think that because God wills that harm is bad, well, then why do you care about that, right? The bottom line is, ultimately, we really can't say anything more than just because that's how I actually feel. That's what it does come down to. But that's critically different, though. That doesn't mean that morality is relative. It doesn't give way, in my opinion, to subjectivity, you know, that, well, then Hitler was right because his buddies agreed with him. No, Hitler harmed people. Therefore, Hitler was wrong no matter how many people agreed. That's how I would answer that question. Thank you.
Okay. For questions, actually, and I thank you for cooperating in what seems to be a somewhat sclerotic is the word that wants to come to mind, contrived way of having questions asked. But we've discovered from past experience that people tend to make speeches when they're given a microphone. So, and apparently I'm no exception. So, I've asked our two debaters to keep their questions as brief as possible because we do need to get out of here by 10:30, so we only have an hour and a half. I have a delightfully large number of questions. I've sorted them, some arbitrarily based on context and some because you put their name on it for each one, and I have a series of questions that we wish both to ask. So I'm going to alternate from one person to the other. And the gentlemen have agreed just to, again, share the microphone. So let's start with, since Michael started, we'll start with him with questions. Okay? First question very simply is, if morality doesn't come from a single source, then how do you distinguish right from wrong when people disagree on what is moral? How do you avoid relativism?
Okay, so relativism, I agree, would not be good. I don't think that relativism, which is, just in case you don't know, relativism, is the idea that, is the idea that, well, you know, your group feels this way, and, you know, a whole bunch of you feel that way, but my group feels this way, so how do we know which one of us is really right or which one is morally correct? Again, what I recommend to people or to anybody is keep in mind that the first two moral domains, harm and fairness, are universal. 23,000 people, the last time I heard it, were surveyed. I know it's actually several thousand more have since been surveyed, and everybody always answers that harm and fairness are moral matters. So we can use that. We can say, look, you know, okay, I used the example of Hitler. Let's make it hypothetical. Let's say that every German citizen agreed that Jewish people should have been treated the way they did, okay? And that there were far more German citizens than there were Jewish people. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that's actually what happened, but let's just say that. So let's say Hitler had 55 million people who agreed that it was not only permissible, but even obligatory to do what was done in World War II, okay? Doesn't matter, because the fact is, it is objective to say everyone agrees that harm is immoral. Because everyone agrees that harm is a moral matter, and everyone, I don't think anybody feels that we don't all have the capacity to feel harm. I mean, you know, we all know that no matter what your skin color is or where you were born, if I punch you, it hurts. So it is objective, in my opinion, to say that harming people is immoral. And I'd have a hard time accepting anybody that say that, you know, that was done in World War II was not harmful. Okay. And by the way, very quickly on that, sorry, I know we're supposed to be quick. A moral theory, I think, if you're troubled over how to hash out, well, what really does harm mean, I recommend to you Martha Nussbaum's Capabilities Approach to Ethics. If you look that up, I think she does a really good job of hashing out a very objective theory for how to determine whether something is harmful. Sorry.
This is a theological question, definitely for Mario. Why is a triune God any more beneficial than a septuple God, and why specifically 3?
Well, is the question why do I think there's 3 or why it's postulated that there are 3? I'm not really sure what the question is that's being posed as far as that, but I think that if someone were to propose a different God, then we could consider it as is, I suppose. In my thinking, I've also considered the invisible pink unicorns and flying spaghetti monster, and I just happen to find that natural theology, that which we can infer from nature through science and philosophy, does not meet these certain ones. So I'm sorry if I didn't answer the question, but I suppose I'll leave it at that.
This is actually for both of you. Okay. So, question for both, to Michael and to Mariano. Under natural morality, there is no altruism, no selfless love. What motivates someone to lay down their life for another person?
Excuse me. In 1964, there was a guy by the name of Hamilton, and he came up with Hamilton's rule. And he calculated it out and figured out an actual equation that shows that kinship altruism will evolve because it actually just makes sense. So when you think about it, an adaptation, be it physical or behavioral, is not something that a member of a species chooses. You know, like a fish doesn't say, well, if I had bigger fins, I could swim faster, and so poof, they have them magically. No, the fish that has the larger fins can swim more quickly and, you know, benefits. It's the same thing with moral behavior. The fact is, the individuals who act in ways that are more socially cohesive, which ultimately benefit the entire group, including the self, are the ones that last longer and you know, create subsequent generations.
Love.
Okay, Mike. If someone evolved to believe that benefiting society was wrong, how would you know he was wrong?
I apologize.
I'm sorry, we were talking.
I apologize.
You were talking.
Sorry.
I forgive you.
Proceed.
Sorry. Okay. If someone evolved to believe benefiting society was wrong, how would you know he was wrong?